Shalom. First off, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Baruch Kadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of GMS who have taught us this word and teach us this word today. And I want to give a salutation unto the elect of the nation of Israel. This is the brother Yatazak Bob with the GMS Nebraska camp. And in this lesson, what I want to get into is just speaking on how, we are at the end of Esau's kingdom, and the scriptures tell us that Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. And that world is speaking of a time period in age, or, basically in era, and this is the era that Esau is supposed to be ruling. And the nation of Israel, who are the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, we are going to rule hereafter. But there's going to be, things that lead toward Esau coming down out of power, and the prophecies and the scriptures, give us what we need to, what we need to be looking for, what we need to know, what's going to be going on that is in the direction of Esau's fall. So let's go to 2 Ezra chapter 9 and start at verse 1, which says, "He answered me then and said, Measure thou the time diligently in itself." And how do we measure the times? Like I spoke about before, we measure the times through these different prophecies. It says, "And when thou seest part of the signs past, which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. And the Most High is going to send his son, whom this world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, whose true name is Yahweh Shai. Yahweh Shai is going to return again, and when he returns, it is going to be to bring a great destruction to America, a great destruction to Esau's kingdom, but specifically America, the land of Israel, and to bring a salvation unto the elect of the true nation of Israel, and it's in verse 3 it says, "Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world." These are two clues right here of what's going to be going on at the end. First it says earthquakes, and I haven't really been paying attention to earthquakes in the news just due to all the other things I've been looking at. But, just from seeing them here and there's always earthquakes going on. I wouldn't be surprised if there was earthquakes happening every single day from different places around the world, but it says uproars of the people, which I want to, give a little bit more attention to. When you look in the news, there's uproars of the people. There's government overthrows going on in Nepal and Indonesia right now, and it's because of, government corruption, economic instability, over there in Nepal, I don't know if he's a prime minister. I don't know what his official title is, but essentially what the president here in the U.S. is what his position would be over there in Nepal. But he had to step down out of power because there's, a violent overthrow of government going on. They set their governmental building on fire, and like I spoke about before, with all the economic instability going on, there's a lack of jobs, the government corruption, and basically the people's tired of it. You have something similar going on in Indonesia right now, where it's the same thing, economic inequality, where the price of living is too much for the citizens, and a lot of the things that these people in these other countries are rising up over, is what's happening over here in the U.S. You got protests going on in France. In France's protests aren't as violent as they have been in Nepal and Indonesia. We're seeing deaths in Nepal and Indonesia. We're seeing people stepping down out of power, but over there in France, they're just speaking on certain political instabilities that's going on. They're upset because of certain promises in government hasn't been kept, such as different budget cuts that they said that they were going to make, certain cost saving reforms that they haven't held true to. So they're seeing protests, but we're not seeing any deaths going on in France. Really, in Nepal and Indonesia is where it's really heating up, or where it has heated up the most, because we're getting to more of the dying down We've seen the climax of it, so to speak. But something I find interesting is that these uproars of the people that are going on in these countries, a lot of the things that they're upset about are things that are going on here in the U.S. Economic instability, government corruption. Hey, you had that big, beautiful bill that was just signed that is targeting the lower class and causing them to have to pay more. All these tariffs that's going on in these different countries, the U.S. citizens are going to feel the backlash of that and see higher prices going on in stores. The cost of living is just getting out of control, and the U.S. people are becoming very irritable, very, tired of what's going on. And that's only one aspect of the government corruption going on over here, because what else do you have going on? Well, you have Trump being that cruel Lord, as it speaks about in Isaiah chapter 19, verse 4, where it says, and the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord. And America spiritually embodies Egypt. The scriptures say that the nation of Israel in Deuteronomy 28:68 that we should go into Egypt again by way of ships. And what is that speaking about? That's speaking about the transatlantic slave trade, because how in ancient Egypt the nation of Israel served a hardcore bondage, a hardcore slavery. Well, here in this modern day Egypt, we have also served a hardcore slavery. That's what it's speaking about with us going into Egypt again by ships. It says, and so, there's different scriptures where when it's speaking about the Egyptians, it's really speaking about Americans. But it says, and the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, said the Lord Yahweh of hosts. And Trump is embodying that cruel Lord and that fierce king. We spoke about, we mentioned the big, beautiful bill, how he's, not being fair toward his citizens, while how he's not making, living any easier for his people. But we see him being that cruel Lord, because of how hard he's coming down on the nation of Israel, which is also prophesied, Jacob's trouble, which will happen during the times of the end, and we're seeing Jacob's trouble coming to pass with Trump sending these ICE deportations. And what did we recently see within these ICE deportations? You have the Supreme Court, where they basically just made it legally, they have legal leeway to target the tribes. They basically have legal leeway to target the tribes. They say that you can basically discriminate in your judgment. If somebody is brown skinned, target them. If they have an accent, that's who you should go after. If they are doing these certain jobs that these quote unquote illegal immigrants usually do, that's who you're going after. And they was already doing that before. They was snatching up, the Latino tribes with no due process, just sending them off to concentration camps, sending them all to these different countries around the world with no due process, asking no questions, not going through any proper protocol. They was just doing whatever they wanted to. And now they have the legal, go ahead to continue to do that. So that's Trump being that cruel Lord. What else is Trump doing that's targeting the tribes? You have the National Guard being deployed, where let's see all the places they've been deployed thus far. I was just looking at it earlier, but I need to look at the list again, because I know they're in Washington D.C. They're speaking about sending them to L.A. Now they're sending them into Chicago. Let's see. Okay, so they're talking about sending them to Baltimore, Maryland, New Orleans, Louisiana, New York, San Francisco, Oakland, and all these places where Trump is sending them. He's focusing on Jake. These are all heavily Jake dominated places. He's not sending the National Guard to Wyoming. He's going into places where Jake is at in the hoods. And we see what did Trump recently do? He changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, and he put out a tweet where he said, we're about to show Chicago why we're called the Department of War. And that's because he basically just waged war on the nation of Israel, you know? And so that's him being that cruel Lord. And the citizens here in America, there's a heavy, spirit of insurrection that is brewing. There's a heavy spirit of irritability, of people getting tired of this administration that's in presidency right now, and the Lord is basically giving us a sneak peek by all these uproars of the people across the world, and through the Spirit is being shown that's about to happen here. And it's prophesied that would take place, because when we read in 2nd Ezra chapter 15 and in verse 16, it says, "For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power." And that sedition is speaking of basically, not listening to the government, basically taking government power in your own hands. And not only is Trump coming down heavy on Jake, and Jake is feeling an oppositional spirit toward Esau, but you also have Esau himself, the regular American people, your regular Joe Schmo, Republicans that's upset. Farmers are feeling the backlash because of all these tariffs that Trump is putting on all these countries. You have all these promises that these MAGA people were expecting that didn't come to pass, so they're upset. And based off of percentages, the percentage of people who are in support of Trump's administration, who believe that he's doing a good job in office, is dropping little by little. And it's getting to the point where basically half the country is against Trump being in power, where half the country is still in support of him. And that friction going on in here is going to do nothing but brew civil war. It's going to brew sedition among men, insurrection, and these are all things that's prophesied to come to pass, at the end of Esau's kingdom. We spoke about how America spiritually embodies Egypt, but it also spiritually embodies Rome. America is the second coming of Rome, and how did Rome, well, there were many reasons why Rome fell, but one of the main reasons was because of the instability that was going on within Rome. And it was class wars. It was rich versus poor. And that's the same thing going on here in America. Not only do you have class wars, not only do you have the left versus the right, but you have race wars going on. It's all type of stuff of just a climate that doesn't breed a kingdom that's going to last. And today, you recently had this Charlie Kirk assassination. And Esau is spinning his web, and Esau has a couple tenets. There's one thing, I forget who the quote is from, but is based, the quote goes, "Let no good crisis go to waste." And that's really based on a tenet where Esau believes in order ab chaos, or order out of chaos, where out of a chaotic situation, Esau will bring order in, or a solution. An example of that is even with the National Guard, where Trump has his problem or his chaos, where he says that crime is, blown out the roof in these different places. Jake is out of control. So what are we going to do? We're going to bring order by way of sending the National Guard. We're going to send martial law. That's a form of order ab chaos. Now, the thing is, I speak as a man with this Charlie Kirk situation because more news has to come about. I want to see more of the, full story, so to speak, to see what narrative that Esau is going to push with it. But I believe that this is going to be another order ab chaos situation, because, Charlie Kirk was a very big name within the Republicans. After his death, you had Trump saying that he was a big friend of Charlie Kirk. He's talking about all the flags around the country are going to be at half mast and stuff in Charlie Kirk's name. And the guy that shot Charlie Kirk, or the suspect right now, because they're talking about there may be another suspect and things like that, and we have to see what comes of that. Right now he's saying that he would have done it again, and this is why I speak. This is why I speak as a man. I believe whoever they end up blaming for the killing of Charlie Kirk, they're going to say that he was a super left-wing leaning guy, that he was a super Democrat guy, which is going to do what? Push more instability within the two sides within America. When you look at all these states, all these cities that Trump is pushing the National Guard in, they're all blue states. They're all heavy Democrat leaning places. And if you have somebody that is a Democrat taking out a big name within the Republicans like that, that's gonna give more leeway, so to speak, or even more of a spirit of Trump to go all in on these blue states. And who is going to take the backlash of that is going to be Jake. So again, I speak as a man, but this is just speculation on what I believe could come out of this situation. And as the story develops, is going to make manifest more, what Esau got going on. But the scriptures say what? Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11. It says, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. When there's things going on in the news, and that's what they're pumping it in our face all day, you can't escape it. It's just all you're seeing. A majority of the time, that's an orchestrated event. That's it's not a black swan event, but a false flag event is the name, to where they create a situation, i.e. 9/11, to bring out a solution that Esau wants. Even with this whole situation with the guy, you had the Jake on the bus that stabbed the Ukrainian woman. Even that situation is fishy. That Esau could possibly be trying to bring out some type of order ab chaos out of that, or frame Jake for being violent more so than he's already doing. I just again, I speak as a man, but it's fishy. But all these things are pointing towards Esau's fall. We're seeing all type of instability, all type of, these things don't point toward a kingdom thriving. Everything that's going on within this country, it's pointing toward, prophecy. And within these prophecies that is pointing toward, it's this country imploding on itself. Now, what are some other things that we have going on in the news? Well, like I spoke of, Trump changed his name from the Department of Defense to the Department of War, and that brings me to, all the war going on, because that's another, prophecy that the scriptures speak of, where it talks about in Matthew chapter, as I was saying, when you get into Matthew chapter 24, verse 6, it says, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So we would see wars and rumors of wars leading up to the end. And what are some wars and rumors of wars that we're seeing? Well, we're seeing everything going on with Israel, in Gaza, trying to displace the Palestinians, committing genocide over there, trying to take that land, and they're blaming everything on Hamas. That's the war going on at face value. Israel just struck Qatar because they're saying that Hamas was over there in Qatar, so they struck a building over there, talking about they were trying to find Hamas, and that's causing strife over there in West Asia. Israel and Iran, which by extension America and Iran, which ultimately is going to lead into Russia jumping in to that war, because the scriptures say the least of the flock shall draw them out. What else is going on with Russia? You got the war between Russia and Ukraine, and you have a recent news update where some Russian drones, which were supposed to be sent into Ukraine, but they went into Poland, and them drones had to be shot down by Poland. Now, Poland is a NATO country. And Poland took that action as, an act of aggression, an act of escalation in the war, where something was just supposed to stay between Russia and Ukraine. Poland is taking that as Russia starting to posture at them. And, with Poland being a NATO country, they're calling for Article 4, where, Poland wants to meet with the rest of NATO to see how they're going to respond to Russia, based off this escalation in the war. Now, Article 4 is a step down from Article 5, to where if a NATO country is attacked, immediately all other NATO countries have to jump in and fight against that country, that is attacking that NATO ally. So we're seeing, an escalation that, that's leading to what? World War III, which is prophesied in the scriptures, which is a major prophecy that's to come. As it says in Revelation, 9 and 11, I believe. Nope, 9 and 12. It says, one woe is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. Which I was looking for a different one, which is Revelation 11 and 14, which says the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And that's speaking of wars. Woe means destruction. It says that, the second woe is past. We're speaking about World War II, and the third woe cometh quickly. And we see all the puzzle pieces moving into place for World War III to come about. As a matter of fact, I wanted to grab this headline from End Time Headlines. You can go to, different news websites and see. But it says, Polish Prime Minister warns that Europe is closer to war than any time since World War II after airspace violations. And I just did a lesson recently, where I was speaking about how the Lord is putting these different leaders of the world in a warlike mindset. Example being Trump talking about he's the Department of War now. And why did he change the name to the Department of War? Because he's in a mindset to where he doesn't want to go the diplomatic route. He's tired of trying to make peace with these countries that ain't trying to make peace. So now he's talking about he wants to win wars. He wants to show, the strength of the American military. And you have the Polish Prime Minister talking about Europe, is closer to war than any time, ever since World War II, which is true, because every day we're getting closer and closer to these prophecies coming to pass, and, this is just, more things leading toward Esau's fall, and, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Every single day, there's more happening, and, they're just tremors. It's just, dominoes falling in the grand scheme of prophecy, in the grand scheme of the Lord's will coming to pass, that Esau coming out of power and Jacob rising up into power. Dominoes, falling within the grand scheme of the Lord ultimately returning, and these things are getting more and more major. They're hitting closer and closer to home. Soon, America is just going to implode on itself. Soon, a major war on an even larger scale of the wars that we're already seeing are going to pop off. So Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Just wanted to get into a couple things going on in the news right now. Again, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Once again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Baruch Kodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of GMS, and a salutation unto the elect.